Hi guys, welcome back to another video. In this video series we are programming the Asuro robot using C programming. So we're still on the first program in the Asuro manual, which was your first program on page 54, as you can see here. So this original code turns the status LED red. In the last video we used some if statements, counters and while loops to flash the status LED and get it to flash between green and red backwards and forwards continuously. Now this program, it worked, but not in an ideal and easily customizable way. The problem with the code versus reality is that code might look like it will work. However, when you're actually working with actual hardware that has real life limitations, you need truly sound code and not just code that looks like it might work. So in this video, what we'll be doing is we'll be using loops as conditional counters, for loops. And these work a lot better than the counters that we used in the last video. I showed you the counter, and I'm going to show you the for loops, as both of them have their place in programming. Both the for loop and the counter you'll probably be using in your final code as well. One thing to keep in mind is that all of this code can be found on my GitHub, which is h84/0-public. Let's get started. So start off by clearing out the code that we did last time, our pseudo code, and let's get rid of this. Obviously we want to keep the return 0 as that ends the program, and we want to keep the init brackets as that initializes the microcontroller ports, right? So before we get started writing code, let's get started writing our pseudo code. As I mentioned previously, pseudo code is the logic and the steps of your actual code without actually writing in any specific programming language. So what we're going to do for this video is we're going to have an infinite loop, as we always have for all of our code. This is basically going to be that the program's just going to keep looping through and through this program over and over again, as we want the status LED to flash green, red, backwards and forward. Then what we're going to do in this instance is we're going to have two for loops, right? Yeah. We're going to have two for loops, and with a for loop we can basically get the code to run a certain amount of times. So we're going to get this code to run 1,000 times, this for loop, and we're going to get this one to run 1,000 times. Cool. And what are we going to get these two for loops to do? Well, fairly obvious. We're going to get this green LED to flash, right? And then we're going to get this one to flash red. And that's it. That's our code. So let's get started. So how do we do the infinite loop? While 1, right? Now we've got our infinite loop there. Now we're going to need to do our for loop. So let's do for. If you don't know what for loops are, I highly, like I said, highly recommend going through the C tutorial, because you're going to struggle to code the Asuro without really having an understanding of the basics. So here's our for loop. I is equal to 0. As long as I is less than 1,000, keep incrementing I and keep doing this code. Right? We're going to do the same here. The one thing I need to mention is the compiler we're using, it doesn't like certain types of code, and you need to code in a certain style. I don't want to go into too much detail on it now, but usually when we're doing for loops, we usually code like this, in I, and usually that would be fine. If I ran this code in Visual Studio Code, it'd be fine. But with the older compilers that we're using for the Asuro, it doesn't like that you declare the I variable in the for loop. It prefers that you declare it outside of the for loop. So you do this. You don't need to go too much into this. When you start coding the Asuro and then you flash it to the Asuro. So for example, if you try to flash just this, like this, it will get an error and it won't flash. Basically, it'll tell you that this code is not C standard that it wants. But what it wants is that you declare int I equal to 0 here, and then you make I is equal to 0, I is equal to 0, like that. Cool. So what do we want to put in our for loops? Well, we want status LED green, right? And then same again here, status LED red. and that's it. So what do we have? We have an infinite loop. We've got a for loop here that's going to be run 1,000 times. We've got another for loop here that's going to be run 1,000 times, and it's going to be in that for loop here. It's going to go green, and here it's going to go red. So how long is it going to take the Asuro to count up to 1,000? Again, as we've said previously, no idea. Probably very, very quick. So that's the issue with doing it like this, and there is a better way to code this, which we'll go over in the next video using the microcontroller sleep function. However, let's see how this one looks, and then in the next video we'll use the sleep functions. So in terms of going at 1,000, here is the video for the Asuro status LEDs flashing green red at I is less than 1,000. Now here's the video at I is less than 10,000, so it should take 10 times as longer. Here is how the Asuro looks at I is less than 20,000. And here is how the status LED flashes at I is less than 30,000. Now, we can't keep on increasing I is less than 10,000, 30,000, 50,000. Eventually, what you'll start to see, and you should try this yourself, just so you can get good grasp with the hardware, is that there are limitations. The Asuro is not going to be able to count to infinity. You wouldn't be able to set I is less than 1,000,000 or I is less than 100,000. Usually, I expect that it would break down about I is 50,000. Microcontroller to take I at 0 and increase it at 1 by 1 by 1 up to a high number. And you're going to find that the Asuro is going to start to have memory management issues. And then more than likely, the status LED will either just go green or just go red and it won't flash at all. So this is why this method is flawed, counting to extremely high numbers. However, we will expand upon this method in the next video using the sleep function, and you'll find that we won't need to set crazy high values. So I want you to experiment with this code, try and see if you can change stuff around, try and see what happens if you declare the I variable here, see if that will work. Remember as well that all of the code written here is available in my GitHub, which you can find a link to in the description. That's it from me. I'll see you in the next video, and if you enjoyed the video, give it a like. Thanks for watching. Peace.